Just talking musicals, musicals with you.
Hello, I'm Lesley Anne Knight and welcome to the Just Talking Musicals meetup, where I get to have a quick catch up with some of today's outstanding theatre professionals from the West End and Broadway. On the other side of the Zoom window today is one of the West End's leading theatre dressers, a job which requires a quick mind, nimble fingers, endless discretion, and appears to attract individuals with a boundless supply of modesty. When I first approached today's guest about appearing on the meetup, I was met with the most disarming reply, which ran something like, "I would be honoured and delighted to be a part of your show, although I'm not quite sure I live up to the calibre of your other guests," followed by, "I've now dressed on over 100 shows." And from out of that glorious statement followed a list of musicals that read like an inventory of the brightest and best shows to grace the West End in the last 30 years. From one of my all-time favourites, Guys and Dolls at the National in the early 80s, to Me and My Girl at the Adelphi, Into the Woods at the Phoenix, The King and I, The Sound of Music, Radio Times, Oklahoma at the Lyceum, The Pyjama Game, Follies, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Wicked, Shrek, City of Angels, The Lorax at the Old Vic, Big, and most recently, Sleepless at the Troubadour. To add to this list of accomplishments, today's guest is also the published author of a trilogy of humorous theatrical novels with brilliant titles: Chewing the Scenery, Climbing the Curtain, and Storming the Stage. Therefore, it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome Davina Elliott to the meetup today. Hello, Davina.
Hello, thank you very much. It made me sound very, very old, all those musicals going back forever. But yes, it's and the fact that I've done over 100 shows is really quite scary. And I keep thinking I really must retire one day before I can't actually do it anymore.
Oh no, but you honestly blew me away with your emails and just saying over 100 shows. And I was like, wow, it's just so fantastic because you've been there with these beautiful, lovely West End shows and worked with some incredible people.
Yes, yes. I mean, people that I used to admire when I was a kid, and then suddenly I end up dressing them and thinking, oh, this is a bit exciting, and thinking, should I tell them? Thinking, no, possibly not. I worked with an actress last couple of years ago that was at drama college with. Not drama school, but just a course when we were both 13. And
Yeah.
she's now a very successful actress, and I'm a dresser. But it was extraordinary to come across something like that after all these years.
Yeah. And before we started recording, we were just talking about, because I was fascinated, and I'm sure anybody else would be, how did you get into being a theatre dresser?
Well, when I was at school, they told me that the only thing I could be if I wasn't going to be an actress, which is what I wanted to be, was basically nothing. There was no other job. You either be an actress or there was. So I thought, well, I'm going to prove them wrong. I wrote to every theatre that I could think of in the land. And the Royal Shakespeare Company wrote back to me saying, we have a position as a dresser. Would you like to be one? And I thought, I have no idea what is a dresser. But I said yes anyway. And I went for the interview with the wardrobe department, and I basically just blagged my way through it, pretended I knew what I was talking about. They told me that the last girl was being sacked because she'd been rude to the actors and wouldn't make them cups of tea. So I thought, right, going to improve my tea making. I make a very good cup of tea now because I don't drink it. And that's how I got it. And I walked in the first day thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they gave me this set of notes and sent me to the dressing room. These poor actors. I mean, they got this absolute idiot going with that, holding her notes like this, going, what do I do next? They were lovely to me. They were so helpful. And yeah, I never stopped after that.
Obviously got a flair for it, but did you have somebody you worked with who helped you, guided you on how to create? Nothing. Wow.
Not on that job. When I then moved to the National, they did the first job I did. They had the last person who was leaving, who I was replacing. They took me around and showed me the job. But the problem with the Royal Shakespeare Company was the girl was sacked. So they wanted somebody instantly, and they couldn't keep her on once they sacked her. So there was nobody to show me around. So I literally had this set of notes saying, right, this is where you go. Then you do a quick change. And thinking, what's that? It was really quite scary, and something that, I was 19 or something. And I think if that happened to me now, I would be like, I can't do this. It's terrifying. I don't know what I'm doing. But when you're 19, you have the confidence of, I want to work in theatre and I can do this, and I'll just ask questions.
Yes. And so then I'm sure when you first started it must have been really stressful because you probably felt like you were going to be caught out at any minute.
It was terrifying. And I thought they always gave you notes. So I thought, well, never mind. Every time I do a new show, they'll just tell me what to do. And then when we got a new show and they said, oh, no, you work it out yourself. It's like, how do I do that? Luckily, it was quite an easy show and the actors kind of talked me through it. But I had no idea that you actually had to work out how to do it yourself.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? But then I suppose then when you went on to have the RSC on your CV, that just set you up for life, I should imagine.
Well, funnily enough, I got the job at the National via Julia Mackenzie.
Oh,
In Guys and Dolls, because I met her vaguely and I'd sent her a letter, a bit of a fan letter really, saying I'm really miserable at the RSC. And she said, I've passed your job onto the wardrobe department here and they have a job for you if you're interested.
well, I never.
So bless Julia. I wasn't dressing her, but I went in and on my first show was Guys and Dolls, which was a pretty terrifying one to do because it was hugely complicated. But I did have somebody to show me just the first show. She just showed me one show and then I was on my own. And the National is a very complicated building when somebody leaves you there. And the first night they all went home from wardrobe and I was left in wardrobe going, I don't know how to leave the theatre. Can somebody please show me out the theatre? Because it's really hard.
Yes, I'm lucky enough. I've been backstage at the National, and you've got to know where you're going, haven't you?
You really do. I mean, I've got pretty good. I was there for a long time. I was there for 4 years. So I was pretty good by the end. But there were still things right up the top on the 5th floor. I had no idea what was going on up there. Still don't.
What a fantastic show to come in on. I mean, that is legendary. That Guys and Dolls, Richard Eyre production at the National, opened 1982, didn't it?
I think so. I came in slightly later on it, just after the three Bob Hoskins and Ian Charleston and Julie Covington had just gone, but everybody else was still there. And I got to dress the wonderful David Healy, who's now sadly no, who's nicely, and Jim Carter, as in who's Big Julie, who really was tall. And I was like on my tiptoes, but both such lovely men to work with in my first job there. I mean, they were just wonderful.
David Healy, I saw that production 6 times. I know we haven't even started our questions yet, but get me started on Guys and Dolls, I'm away. David, that production was magical. If you were feeling low, it would just make you feel, it was just sunbeams, wasn't it? And people just, anyone that's seen that production of Guys and Dolls, just go on about it because it's just feel good factor start to finish. But every single element about that show was exciting. And David Healy in Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat. Just wonderful. I was actually lucky enough a few years ago to interview Richard Eyre to talk about that production. And he said, if on a Saturday, his children, he would say to them, what do you want to do this afternoon? They'd say, Daddy, can we go to the second half of Guys and Dolls? Just because I can't remember now, where Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat must open the second half, mustn't it? But it got 3 encores at least every production, didn't it?
It didn't open the second half. It was about halfway through the second half because the second half was opened by the hot box, that wonderful waiter, Kevin Williams, doing the campest.
Oh, yes.
Campest clearing of tables. And
yes.
Then I think it was Take Back Your Mink because we had a quick change after that. And then it went into Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat later. But yes, it did. It brought down the house. I mean, encores every single night. It was great for us dressers. It was like, oh, we can breathe. There's nothing happening. They're doing another number.
Oh, I just loved it. And the Hot Box girls were just sensational, weren't they? I'm just beautiful. But David Healy, honestly, was just, I'd say, better than Stubby K, the way he did Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat.
He was phenomenal and the loveliest man you can ever imagine. I just wanted to, because he had all this padding that he had to wear to be fatter. I just wanted to hug him every night with this padding because he was just so cute. Not very professional, obviously, but I didn't. But it was just he was so lovely.
Yes, I can see it in my mind's eye now. His beautiful smile, and Jim Carter, his voice for Big Julie was so low, wasn't it?
Yeah,
just memorable. Right now, I suppose we ought to get into our first question of the meetup, and that was, how was your work diary looking in March 2020 last year? Because now we're talking at the beginning of 2021, I suppose I should say, to mark it.
Yes, well, we were literally on day one of technicals of Sleepless at the Troubadour in Wembley when everyone said, we've got to watch Boris Johnson. So we all rushed off and watched Boris Johnson, who said, I'm not closing the theatres pretty much, but nobody should go to them. So we're all like, well, that's confusing. But we kept on going for one more day because we were teching. But then Sonia Friedman closed all her shows and everybody else. So in the end, we just went home. So we did, I think, 2 days.
Yeah.
And we just packed everything away. But then our incredibly wonderful producers, Damien Sanders and Michael Rose, so determined. They kept saying May, June. I mean, they kept on. And then they decided on August. And then they said the theatres weren't allowed to open, but they still kept saying, well, maybe. We kept going. And the week before we were supposed to open, they said theatres could open. And we did our entire 6-week run with testing every single day. We had incredible COVID situations sorted out. Nobody was allowed to have a chair further away than 2 meters, whatever the one is. So, you had to have 2 meters between your chairs in the dressing rooms. So they opened extra rooms for us there. Once you'd been tested, you weren't allowed to leave the building that day. So you had to bring your food in or get Deliveroo.
Yeah.
Who for some reason just cannot find the stage door of the theatre, which is really annoying when you're waiting for your food. You're waving, you're saying, but I can't come to you, I can't leave the building. And sanitizer everywhere you went. And we were so lucky because towards the end it started getting bad again, and they started saying you can't get groups of this and stuff like that. So we were so lucky, and I thank them gratefully. And it was brilliant to be able to do a show. And the people who came to press night that I knew, the party was outside, we weren't allowed to have it inside, we had to have it outside, so we all wrapped up. They were just saying, oh my God, it's so wonderful to see a show again. And
yes.
the reactions were just amazing every night. People were almost crying because it was a live performance. It was so lucky because so few shows had managed to do that.
I went to see it. I went to sit to watch Corrie English. And it was the first theatre I saw last year. Yes, it was, because I hadn't seen anything before March. And the whole feeling, knowing that the security was quite high and you have your temperature taken before you go in, and people are more familiar with it now, and sitting socially distanced and with a mask on, and when I first arrived to sit in the audience all on my own, with my programme, though I still had a programme, and I just thought, oh, this is weird. And then the lights went down, and then the music started, and then everything started, and I felt like I was back. You feel like, oh, we've got some normality thing. I sat there and I got that same magic that I get when I sit in the theatre, and I think, oh, that's better. And I was just lost in it. And I think everybody in the theatre, even though we were all sitting apart, it didn't feel like it was, not as full as it would normally be. It just felt, it felt normal. And it was so wonderful that they were able to create that there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was wonderful, and everybody who came. I mean, it was so bizarre because we kept saying we're sold out, and you think, oh, how wonderful. And then you look out and there'd be like people dotted around the auditorium, which isn't what you're used to when a thing's sold out. But we were sold out for socially distanced. We were sold out for the amount of people we were allowed to have.
Yeah. And you look out, presumably a load of people wearing masks, and that must be a surreal feeling. But and the great thing about the Troubadour, of course, is that it's so big, isn't it?
It's absolutely huge. I mean, we had our testing in the front of house to start with, and then when the audience was allowed in, we moved into the restaurant, so they couldn't use that, because the testing was it took about 3 hours every day to get everybody through. Yeah. So there was quite a lot of sitting around, so it was quite good to have a good space that we could. And in the summer we could sit outside, and when it was hot we could sit outside as well, which was really nice. But because you did get a little bit claustrophobic being in the building from, like, if on a matinee day you'd be there at 10 for testing and you wouldn't leave till 10 at night, and you weren't allowed to go outside apart from the little area just outside the stage door, which you could go out to, and that was it. So
apart from Sleepless last year, did you have other interesting projects that you were involved in? I suppose in terms of theatre dressing, there was probably, because everything's gone online, and you've got some streamed things from theatres, but as a writer, were you able to get in, and maybe you were involved in stuff as a theatre dresser, I don't know, but were you able to do projects?
No dressing. No, it's a long way. You need very, very long arms to dress somebody who's in a different. Yeah. Yeah, you go. Just throw your. There was one point in Sleepless where they said, we had to keep 2 meters apart. You're like, well, but that's not going to work anyway. Yes, I did. I wrote a script called "The Footsteps Are in My Head," which I got 2 of the lovely actors that I have once dressed: Michael Xavier, who I dressed in the Pajama Game, and Robert Lonsdale, who I dressed on From Here to Eternity. And bless them, they rehearsed it on Zoom with me as the sort of, just the writer going, no, I don't like that. Or they were very helpful about saying, can we change this? And then they went away and they shot it individually, which was really hard for them because they had to listen to lines that somebody else had done, but not being there. And then Michael directed and edited it together. And he did an incredible job. I think it took him forever. And it's now out on YouTube and they're just brilliant. So and I've just written a sequel, which of course, being me, I've decided to make it really difficult and make it that they're in the same room. So I have no idea how we're going to shoot that. But yeah, it's my major achievement. And I was just thrilled with both of them because they were brilliant. And the fact that it was something to do.
Yes, it's exciting how, even though this is not an ideal situation, how creativity will out, isn't it? That you, and I suppose being in a form of lockdown is in a way, it's an ideal situation for a writer because there's no distraction.
I have written more things since I've got this book called 712 Things to Write About. And I have so far, I think, written 500 of them during lockdown. Wow. So, and that doesn't include the plays, the films. And I wrote another script for Christmas just for a family thing to fun, and not books and stuff so much, but little things, lots of little ideas. Because yes, it's a solo occupation, and you can just sit there and do it, and you don't have to see anybody.
Yes, yeah. Isn't it lovely how if you've got a creative mind, that not having to keep to the same thing all the time and allowing yourself to explore other avenues, writing and seeing where it takes you can lead to some surprising results, can't it? I mean, filming with them and creating a real script and having it performed and getting to a point where it will probably go further, writing books, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky that they both agreed to do it, because they're both great screen actors. And, I was very, very lucky. But yeah, it just came as an idea. It was something that BBC did. They were doing a whole lot of little short ones. I thought, well, I can just write a little Zoom thing. I mean, I think the reason that I've tried to do the next one, not on Zoom necessarily, that they're in the same room, is I think everyone might be getting a little bit sick of everything being done on Zoom. The staged thing that's on BBC at the moment, I think is slightly got a bit tired now.
I still love it.
See, I like the first one. I'm a little bit over it now. My mother said, oh, I think that yours is so much better than theirs, which I completely agree with. But, that's she might be a bit biased.
But when Staged came out, it was so refreshing because it said what we all felt. It described what we all felt. And I love the craziness of the second series as well. But that's something that's come out of all of this. So it is fascinating to see what's grown out of it. But I mean, in terms of where we go now, where do you, in your head, how do you envisage theatre's recovery as we come out of this crisis?
It's so difficult because until we all get these vaccinations and they prove that they work and stuff like that, it's still not going to be possible. For theatres to run at a third capacity, whatever it is. I mean, Sleepless, we didn't make any money. I mean, we lost money. They were just willing to do that. But most theatres, bless them, most theatres can't really afford to do that. And we couldn't have afforded to do it for 6 months. 6 weeks was about it because the testing alone. And if we have to continue being testing, that's very time consuming and very expensive. And it's all right for the actors, but you've still got to be careful of the audience. And you can get them all wearing masks. But my slight concern about that is, but as soon as somebody buys a drink or a food or something in a theatre or a cinema, then they can take their mask off. So you might then end up sitting next to somebody who has their mask off to have their gin and tonic. And then you've got that issue. I don't know. I think it's kind of, I don't know. It's a really hard situation. And I felt really, I think everybody was more upset by being called unviable by the government than anything else of all this whole thing, because that just made us feel so unimportant. And we aren't important. People love the theatre, and people love working in the theatre, and we give a lot of money to our industry gives money to the government hand over fist.
Hold on, I've got some facts here.
Oh.
I've got some fabulous facts here on that subject, if I can only find them in time. Arts Council England commission each year a report for the Centre for Economics and Business Research to produce. And in April 2019, the report highlights are that the arts and culture industry has grown 390 million in a year and now contributes 10.8 billion a year to the UK economy. And you think, wow, and the sector contributes 2.8 billion a year to the Treasury via taxation and generates a further 23 billion a year and 363,700 jobs. It's massive, and it's not to be sniffed at. And also, hold on, productivity in the arts and culture industry between 2009 and 2016 was greater than that of the economy as a whole, with gross value added per worker at 62,000 for arts and culture compared to 46,800 for the wider UK economy. That's massive.
Yeah.
And yet, no matter how much people talk about it, it just seems to always be brushed under the carpet when it comes to funding.
It is, and it's such a hard situation at the moment, because it involves such a large amount of people in a small space.
Yeah.
Backstage and in the auditorium, you can't have people really that spaced out and make any kind of money unless you've got a one-person show, which is what they were trying to do before lockdown.
Yeah.
And I mean, what Broadway have done and just closed it, they've just said closed it. We've tried to get it open here, but Nika Burns opened all her shows, and they lasted a week. So it was very brave. I personally thought she was completely mad, but hugely admirable. Because I just didn't see it. I mean, we had such a tiny window with Sleepless, and we were incredibly lucky. But I just thought the winter was going to be, and the Panto at the Palladium, I just thought, wow, that's taking a huge risk.
But Andrew Lloyd Webber has done a lot to try and keep the profile up and to try and make it work, hasn't he?
He's great. He came to Sleepless actually to see how we were doing. And
did he?
I believe so. I mean, we weren't allowed to see anybody. No one was allowed to come backstage. Yeah. But I believe he came. But yes, he's done an amazing job. I'm actually really impressed by what he's pushed and stuff. But he still ultimately, whatever he does to his Palladium, he still can't actually disobey the government and say, well, I'm going to keep on going.
No, exactly. But it was so refreshing. It was so nice to hear him saying, no, this is what I'm doing and I intend to do this and this is possible, because he's influential enough to actually have some impact on what goes on in government, largely because he's got a seat there, hasn't he?
Yes.
And so so at least that actually if he's standing up for it, at least there's going to be a voice crying out for theatre.
Yes. But I'm just so glad I'm not a producer. I mean,
yes,
I just feel for them, and I mean, I'm quite grateful that I'm not on a show at the moment and not knowing whether I'm coming or going. Because even with Sleepless, waiting to know whether we actually were doing it, but we had no choice. And I still, until the day I actually turned up there for my first day of testing, I still didn't think it was actually going to happen.
Well, but understandable, yeah. Now, on to lighter subjects.
Yes.
Meetup is also about some fun questions. But I like marking what we're going through at the moment because I think it's really important historically, because one day people will actually look at these interviews and go, wow, theatre was locked down for quite some time. And it is important, I think, as part of our history for theatre, isn't it? But your next question, fun question, what is your favourite musical show of all time?
Well, I think I would have to say to watch rather than work on, which is different. It would have to be Salad Days, which I saw when I was about 12 years old. There was a production in London and I just completely fell in love with it. And every time my mother would say, what do you want to go and see? I'd go, Salad Days. I mean, luckily she also loved it because she grew up on it. But I must have seen it about 6 times. And I think on a 6-month run, I mean, literally anybody who offered to take me to theatre, I was there. And I discovered that my sister's best friend's uncle was Julian Slade, who wrote Salad Days. So I got a note to him saying, is there any way I could borrow your script? I'd love to read it. And he sent me a copy and I copied it out by hand, the whole script. I didn't realize at that age that you could go and buy things from French's. So I copied out the whole script and then I tried to persuade all my friends and my sisters to perform Salad Days with me. And I never got it on, but I tried very, very hard.
What a brilliant idea.
And it's the most beautiful score. It's mad. It's a mad story. I mean, a magic piano, but it makes you feel good. And the music is actually stunning.
And it's nice to hear somebody wave the flag. That's an ink. I never saw Salad Days, but a lady little friends of mine when I was growing up, their mum was in it. And I've just been racking my brains trying to remember her stage name. But her real life name was Ella Barkworth, and she was in Salad Days in London. But who wrote Salad Days again?
Julian Slade. He wrote the music, and Dorothy Reynolds. She wrote the lyrics book.
So you're flying the flag for a British written show, aren't you? Musical
of the 50s. It was the longest running musical of its time. I think it's now been well outrun, but it ran forever. And as my mother saw the first production, and I obviously saw the revival. I'm not quite that old because it was on in the 50s. It was a 50s musical, and it's just beautiful. But I've never worked on it, so it's slightly different. I mean, if you're doing something more modern, I love The Producers. I think The Producers is a brilliant show of clever pastiches of other shows, and the production, Susan Stroman's production. I was lucky enough to see that on Broadway. And there's oldies like Golden Guys and Dolls, which everybody loves. But Salad Days. But to work on, I suppose it would have been The Sound of Music, because I got to work on 2 productions of The Sound of Music. One was a tour with Christopher Cazenove and Liv Roberts, and one was at Regent's Park about 5 years ago. And actually, that's a beautiful score. I mean, I had a wonderful time on both productions.
Yes.
And it is a fantastic score. I mean, it's magical and it's beautiful, and it was fun to work on because it's a very busy show and you've got children, so everyone's very happy, and it's Rodgers and Hammerstein, what more can you say? And it's fabulous.
And did you just say you worked on the Regent's Park production?
I did, yes.
That is the way they did that. I saw that, and it's because you can play about with your environment so much, and so the lighting and everything about that is just so exciting, isn't it? Because everybody's outside, you do feel a part of the story, and and as it gets darker around you and the lights change and I just loved it. And I went from it being the kind of the sort of saccharine film version, even though I love The Sound of Music and I spent most of my childhood dancing around the City Room to that. Then when you see it revived in a way like the Regent's Park production, it is just stunning, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it was, yes, I had a wonderful time on it. It's a weird thing, Regent's Park, though, because like you say, all the lighting and everything is brilliant. Then you do a matinee and it just doesn't really work. Plus, the matinees, we had a very, very hot time during some of that run, and people were being taken out because they were fainting on the matinee. So we'd be doing quick changes in the bar area, which we had to do for like the wedding and stuff. So I'd be stripping poor old Maria down to her underwear and putting a wedding dress, and turn around and see like 6 people in the audience going, "Ooh," because they'd all had to be brought out because they'd been faint. So we had to kind of get cloths and stuff to cover the poor actresses, because it was that was quite an interesting one, because you do use every entrance and exit, including the bar and stuff. So it's wonderful to work there. I loved it.
That's the thing I wanted to talk to you about. It was the thing that Ken Brown was talking to me about, tracks. So that when you're working your job and you're everything to do with dressing, that it's much more complicated than people imagine, isn't it?
It can. It does depend on the show. I think Americans work slightly different on Broadway than we do, with their tracks and stuff. Some shows I mean, I always carry my notes with me for about the first 2 weeks of a run, because and if it's complicated, I just can't take it all in. But there are occasions where you can't look at your notes because you just don't have the time, and then you have to memorize those ones. You think, right, this, the other. You do work out a choreography for your changes, and you do have to be in certain times in certain places. Some wardrobe people like to work out a plot for all their dresses, and they tell them where to go. I don't really like that very much, because it wasn't how I started. I started very much that you were given your actors and you worked it out, and the wardrobe people didn't have anything to do with it. Now they're much more about everybody should bond together. I don't think I'm very good at bonding together. I'm a bit of a maverick. I'm like, I do my own thing, thank you, this is how I work. And people are quite tolerant of me now. They're kind of used to me, and they know that I'll do it. So
you've got to be massively organised, and in the same way as an actor has to learn their lines, you've got to learn. You need to know everything about every detail of everything has got to be there, hasn't it? At a certain time.
Yeah, I mean, the working out of the plot. I mean, I think the most complicated plot I've ever done was not actually a musical, which was Dr. Faustus. And it was like a jigsaw. I mean, you literally had to take little pieces and put them where, because there was only two of us, and it was incredibly complicated. And I actually ended up running from change to change because I didn't have time. There was no way you could read your notes on that. So I had my notes stuck in various different places because I didn't have time to get them out of my pouch and read them. So I just have little reminders. And that, I think, was the most complicated. I don't think I slept for about a week during the take of that because I was so worried about it. But I mean, with a normal show that's not like that one, you do learn your breaks, and you do learn when you can look at things. But you do pick it up quite quickly because you're doing it every night.
Yes.
But I have done shows where I have had to literally stick them up because I don't have time to get them out of my pouch, look at them, put them back. So you just stick the post-it notes somewhere helpful that just reminds you of where you have to go next.
What's the biggest kind of drama you've had backstage in regards to trying to get everything together and suddenly something doesn't look like it's coming together?
Well, the biggest drama is probably zips breaking is usually the worst thing. I did have to send somebody on once with her zip broken, and I just went, "Don't turn around." She's like, "I've got to do a dance routine." I'm like, "Well, do it quickly with your back to the audience." I mean, the poor girl. She had this huge straight dance routine, and she had to do the whole thing with her bra and her mic pack showing.
Oh.
And I just felt, but there was, in circumstances like that, you actually can't do, and it was so quick, there was no time to safety pin her, which is what you'd normally do, is shove safety pins in. But things like that. There was one on the musical Gene Seberg at the National Theatre where there were all these monks robes forever, and they changed it during previews. They changed it so we had more monks robes, and suddenly all these monks robes came off at us, and we had to reset monks robes for the end, and none of us had time to work out whose monks robe belonged to who. And that was an absolute disastrous night because we threw monks robes on the wrong people for the wrong time, and everybody looked really, really stupid, and they had to employ a monk robe dresser just to come in and sort out monk robes.
That's not surprising because everybody's different shapes and sizes, aren't they? So that must have been hysterical.
It was.
Of course, in out of your many shows that you've worked on, I really wanted you to mention Oklahoma.
Yes, the wonderful Hugh Jackman.
Yes.
Yes. To which people still go, "You dressed Hugh Jackman, and what was he like?" As if he's some, amazing god, which of course he's amazing. But he's the most normal. Well, I am talking Oklahoma. I haven't met him I saw him a few years back, but not for a while. He was the most normal, lovely, family orientated man. I had a birthday party while I was dressing him, and I held it at my mother's house, which was not very far from where he was staying. And I said jokingly, "If you want to pop round for my birthday party garden." And he went, "Oh, I've got friends around." I'm thinking, he's just being nice. Birthday party, doorbell rings. He said, "My friend's cancelled. Is it still okay if we come?" He and his wife. Sitting in my mother's garden.
Isn't that lovely?
He's that kind of person. He was just wonderful. I mean, the whole production was amazing, but when he started doing that number at the beginning,
Oh, what a beautiful morning.
Yes, he just started, and you just get shivers because he was amazing.
Yes.
And just so gorgeous. I mean, he was never cross or fed up, or he was the most lovely company man. He always used to go around and say hello to everybody. He was just extraordinary.
I've talked to Maureen Lipman about that Oklahoma production, because she was Aunt Ella, and she talked about sitting on the stage waiting for him to come on, and listening to his beautiful voice coming from the wings just as it started. And I remember sitting there watching it with my mum, and it was just lovely. It's just a sigh goes throughout the audience, and everybody's like, oh, this is going to be lovely. And his voice is he's got such a stunning singing voice, hasn't he? It's just perfect for Curly McLean.
It is. He was. I mean, Maureen was brilliant as well. I ended up dressing Maureen later, actually, because we got on quite well on that show. And it was that kind of company. I mean, there wasn't really a bad seed in that company. Everybody, because it came from Hugh and Maureen, you know, yeah. She's also a very good company person. She's very inclusive of everybody. She's the first person who will introduce herself to you when you arrive. And for those two, and Josephina, you know, from that kind of seed, a company is just wonderful.
Yeah, and that was a terrific production, because Josephina was dancing Laurie's Dream, wasn't she? And I think she was the first person to dance that.
And Hugh was dancing as well. Bless him, he had to do the dream sequence, and he really was not a dancer, but they worked it differently so that he didn't have to do as much dancing, but he still did it.
Yeah, beautifully done. And of course, what I think, I don't know if everybody knows this, but that's how he got discovered for the X-Men, isn't it? Because the producer of the X-Men went to see Oklahoma, and they saw Hugh Jackman as Curly in Oklahoma, and that's how he got into the X-Men. Couldn't be more different, really.
No. Well, he really was, because he'd worked in Australia and done musicals over there, but then we brought him over here to do Oklahoma from Australia, and then yes, he did. He was, at the time, he kept saying, "I'm people are showing an interest. I'm doing screen tests." You know, and he said, you know, that he was so excited about it. He said, "I didn't want to have to do anything," and then he went off, and it suddenly. And the next time I saw him was when he was doing The Boy from Oz on Broadway. And he sort of, I saw him afterwards, and he says, well, I've come a bit away from Oklahoma. And he's just thinking, yeah, quite a way, still amazing.
It's that path that we go on, isn't it? And not quite, never knowing knowing what our dream is, but the adventure along the way that it can be is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So next up, you've answered that question beautifully. Thank you, Davina.
You're welcome.
Who's your favourite artist today and yesterday? Musicals. It can be musical films as well.
Well, yeah, this is hard. Not the old one. That's easy. That would be Donald O'Connor. I absolutely love Donald O'Connor. Singing in the Rain, I Love Melvin, Call Me Madam, There's No Business Like Show Business. I mean, he's a phenomenal. And I personally think watching him with Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain, I think he's a better dancer, and I probably get shot for saying that, but I love his style. I love Gene Kelly's style too, but he's got something. And he also came from a theatre background. He came from vaudeville.
Yes.
With Judy Garland. I think he used to perform with Judy Garland. And
his brother. He performed with his brother, I think, in vaudeville.
Oh, I didn't know that, but I certainly knew he did Judy Garland and stuff. And I just think he's just, I mean, there's a number in I Love Melvin where he dances with a whole lot of a coat rack and all these different hats and coats, and he comes out and he's a different character, and what he can do with his face and at the same time dancing. And I would watch him. If he was on a show in London, I would pay thousands to go and see him.
Oh gosh, yeah. Amazing. And I don't know if it's true, but I read a few years ago that scene, when he runs up the wall in Singing in the Rain.
Yep. And
he has a dances with a coat stand in that, doesn't he, with a hat on it?
Yep.
But that whole routine is massive, and they'd filmed it, and that wasn't camera tricks either, was it? He knew how to run up that wall like that from working in vaudeville, and they did
Yep.
amazing things. So it was very acrobatic and incredibly impressive. But I read that after he'd filmed that scene, which must have been exhausting, that he was lying down in his trailer or his dressing room, and they had to come back and said there'd been something wrong with one of the camera angles, and they had to do it again.
Oh, wow.
So I gather we see the second take, which was extraordinary.
That is extra. Oh God, that camera person must have been in trouble or whatever it was, the situation.
Can you imagine?
I didn't know that. No, I mean, he is extraordinary, and I just think he's brilliant. I think it would be harder to do a modern one, because I mean, there are so many people that I know that I think are brilliant. You know, people like my two actors that did my film, which are both brilliant. My lovely friend Diane Pilkington, who I think is absolutely amazing. But I feel like it should be somebody that I don't know, because otherwise I'm kind of, promoting my friends.
Yes.
So I suppose it would be, there isn't somebody that I would necessarily rush to see, specifically to see them. I would go to see a show that they were in. I suppose if you went kind of half old, half new, I'd say maybe Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
Because I've got her record of Mame, and that's just the Mame of all times. I wish obviously I couldn't have seen it because I wasn't old enough. But I did see her in Blithe Spirit on Broadway, and that was quite exciting. Even though it wasn't a musical, it was just amazing to see her on Broadway. I've seen her Sweeney Todd on film. That's amazing. So somebody, I suppose, like that, or Adrian Lester. I think Adrian Lester could sing and dance. I mean, his production performance in Company was incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
I had a huge crush on Dennis Lawson in Mr. Cinders.
Oh yeah.
They're not so modern, but I mean, Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick in The Producers, again, I would watch them do it 100 times. It
just makes you laugh out loud, doesn't it? It makes you feel better, because it's just so great. And it's the energy.
So I suppose those would be a few, but I can't say there is anyone, that it is more of an old
favourites, can you? You don't want to upset anyone. So
well, that's it. I mean, all the people that I work with, I don't work with anybody that's bad, obviously. So, I could name all the musicals I've ever done and all the people, like, I could say Hugh Jackman, but it wouldn't be right because he's somebody I know. So I'm biased.
Yeah. The entire cast of Guys and Dolls from 1982 to 83.
Well, yeah. Yes, what's left of them, sadly.
I actually had the chance, I was in a rehearsal studio in Marylebone Lane a long time ago, but I was practicing in one room, and upstairs there was rehearsal going on, and the man who runs the studio said to me, I thought you might like to know Julia Mackenzie's in a rehearsal upstairs and they're just having a break, and I know how you feel about Julia Mackenzie because she's my favourite Adelaide of all time. Miss Adelaide. Oh, and I said, oh gosh, yes. And I went upstairs, and there's always a million things you want to say to people. And I said to somebody the other day, all I could think of saying to her was, I think I love you. And she must have said, oh no, why have you just disturbed my coffee break? But I just had to tell her how wonderful. I didn't know how to put it into words, but she was so perfect as Miss Adelaide in Guys and Dolls.
She absolutely was. I mean, I could pick Julia Mackenzie, but again, she's somebody I know, as in the fact she got me a job. So again, I can't pick my friends. It's not right.
That's okay. That's beautifully answered. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, does it get any easier? Broadway or West End?
Oh, yeah. I've always wanted to work on Broadway. It's been my dream, and I've never managed to do it until, and I only did it short. My lovely Michael Xavier, who did my film, he was doing Sunset Boulevard on Broadway, and I was doing PA work for him at the time, and he asked me if I would go out and help him to set up on Sunset Boulevard. So I went out there for about 3 weeks, I think, and it was just the most amazing thing because I was completely included in those 3 weeks. They made me feel so welcome. I set up, I wasn't dressing him, which was lovely, in fact. Somebody else was doing the hard work. And I set up his dressing room. I organised his first night presents. I mean, I arrived with 2 bags of stuff from from Fortnum and Mason's, and I ran around and I got him food so he didn't have to go out. I got stuff from the apartment set up, and it was just the most amazing experience to finally be on Broadway, to buzz that stage door and be let in, and them to go, "Hi, Davina," you know, like I was part of the company and I knew everybody, and everybody was just gorgeous. And I was so sad to go. I could have stayed the whole 3 months or whatever he did it, but I couldn't really be affordable. But that was my dream, and I finally sort of managed to make it come true.
If anybody had told you that you'd do that when you were 19 at the RSC, what would you?
I would have thought, a PA? What's that? I might have been less surprised then. Maybe I would have expected that it might have happened to me. And I'm not sure. No, I've always been mad about Broadway, so no, I probably would have been really excited. And it was just, I still can't believe I did it. After the first night party, and I had to go home, I think the next day, I remember walking through, and it was snowing that night, and I was walking home from the party to the hotel, and it was snowing, and I just wanted to jump in the air and scream with happiness. It was the most wonderful thing. I've actually done it. I've done it.
It's so lovely, isn't it? It's being around those theatres, being in that theatre district, knowing that this is where it's all, in terms of musicals, and for me, that's where it started, and that you're treading in the footsteps of these greats, and you know that this is what you've dreamed of and been fascinated by since you can remember. And when you're there and you see it all happening, and you go into the theatre and you smell it and you think, wow. And for me, the theatres are slightly feel different on Broadway than they do. I love West End theatres and I love the history of West End theatres, but equally walking into a Broadway theatre, it's different. It's covered in playbills. I can't believe that people throw their playbills on the ground, and I go around. I'm one of those people going around afterwards, going, "Oh, I'll have that one." I love them. I cherish them, and I think, there's a whole different excitement about Broadway, isn't there? They're both so different, but so exciting from many.
Well, I mean, I think there's also, it's the working on Broadway. It's a very different. I mean, the dressers there, they have a kind of Saturday meeting between shows, and they all go and meet in a restaurant and have dinner together. I mean, we don't do that in London. We know some of the other dressers, but it's not like that. They're very much a community. All the theatres are a community. I think much more so, maybe because they're all very close together, so you don't have very far to go. We're much more spread out in the West End. I mean, if you're at the Dominion and you know somebody at the National, you know, it's way too far to go between shows to meet them. Whereas you meet on 44th Street or something, you're all within about 10-minute walk.
Yes.
And I think that makes a huge difference. But people respect the theatre more on Broadway. I mean, it's an event. They love it. They come, and it's a whole thing, and you stand outside afterwards and they put the barriers out and everybody signs, and it's an automatic, you know, because I went out with Michael when he was signing, and they all just do it. It's fun. It's part of the deal.
Yes.
And it's just, I don't know, there's a love for musical theatre that Broadway has that we don't quite have, and I don't know why, but they just get it, and we love it, but not quite so intensely for some way, and I don't quite know what it is.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's always Broadway for musicals for me, apart from the National and you know what. But yeah, no, I love that, and I think everybody gives a different answer, obviously, and it's when you talk about Broadway, your eyes light up, and it's wonderful, isn't it? It's not just the distance either. It's just some other magic, isn't it?
If I could do a show over there, I'd do it like a shot, but I think only as going with somebody from here, because they have a very different system for dressing over there, as Ken, I'm sure, told you, that they do their own laundry for their actors, and they do their own maintenance. I don't do any of that. We have people that do that, so I don't look after any of my actors' costumes. At the end of the evening, I just give them to the wardrobe and they do them. Yeah. And I like that. I don't sew very well, which I'm sure Ken would be very shocked at, but I don't that's not my thing. I don't particularly enjoy doing laundry, and I don't sew. I'm very good at looking after actors, at least I hope I am, and making tea and running around after them. That's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah. And it's a different division of labour, isn't it? That's the way
Mm.
that the job has evolved over the years.
Mm.
Right, now to the most hysterical question of today's interview. Because when we came up with this question a while ago, we didn't imagine I'd be speaking to a published author, because, as you know, the last question is, if you were to write a book about your life up to now, what would the title be? And what would your favourite chapter be? And I happen to have one of your books here. This is the first, Chewing the Scenery, the first of the Judith Gold trilogy. I've got to ask you, how did this come about?
Oh, well, not very long story. I love writing. I've always loved writing. I unfortunately had an English teacher that told me I couldn't write English, which made me very depressed for 8 years, and I gave up. When I was on the tour of The Sound of Music with Christopher Cazenove, and I was dressing the lovely Christopher Cazenove, if anybody remembers him from Dynasty or The Duchess of Duke Street, he was a lovely actor. And I wrote a backstage spoof of The Sound of Music for the last performance, and I played Maria. And it was actually quite good. I have to confess, it was quite funny, and they all watched it and it went down well. And Christopher came around afterwards to find me to say it was absolutely brilliant. And he said, "Why aren't you writing? You're really funny and you're really clever." And I thought, oh, well, if Christopher thinks I can do that, maybe I should try. So I tried, and I was pretty bad to start with. And I wrote a lot of short stories, and I wrote a lot of kids' stories, which sadly didn't get published, but went down very well with the children on Shrek when we used to have story time. And then I started thinking, well, why can't I try and write a novel about backstage people? And I wrote the first chapter sitting in a Starbucks, thinking, a bit like J.K. Rowling, if she can write in a coffee shop. And it sort of spiraled from there. And it was extraordinary because the character of Judith Gold, everybody wants to know who she's based on. And she's based on, quite a lot of different people. And I couldn't possibly say if she was they're all based on a lot of different people. They are nearly all based on somebody, apart from possibly the Echo, the beauty pageant queen. I don't know any of those. And Judith sort of took off, and she started writing the books herself, which sounds terribly naff. But I've never with these books had any idea of where I was going. I've never planned anything. She just kind of became a very strong character. And yeah, she now has 3 books and a short story which I wrote in lockdown, which isn't actually published. I just sent it out to a few friends that are fans of Judith's. And I just love her. She's everything I stand for in theatre. She's passionate. I mean, she's rude and well, yes, she says what she thinks, and she can be bloody minded, but all she cares about is theatre. And I think that says a lot about what I think too. I love the theatre, and I love people who love the theatre and who are professional.
Yes. No, I haven't read all of Chewing the Scenery yet, but what I know of her is that, no, she doesn't suffer fools. And I'm looking forward to the rest of that story. But getting back to your question, is that your title for your book of your life up to now? Or what would your title of your life story be?
Well, I have to say I'm quite fond of my titles. So I think if I hadn't written one, I mean, Chewing the Scenery is a great title. I mean, I did have to do this the other day. We were talking about titles and people are always joking around. I said, well, the title really should be, because this is the question I always get asked, is, can't actors dress themselves? I think that should be the title of my book about theatre, because people always say, can't actors dress themselves? You're like, yes, well, they can, but please don't tell them or I won't have a job. But also, they have no idea, like you say, with the tracks and stuff, how complicated it can be, that you have to be in the right place with the right thing, and they can't always do up a corset themselves. No. or a hook and eye at the back, and certainly not in in Sleepless, the last change I had was this horrible little zip. I hated it, and it was a really quick change in a quick change room in the dark, and I hated it every night. But there was no way that she could have done it herself.
Sometimes you only have seconds to change, don't you?
Yes, and this one, I think we did actually time it, and it was a minute, but it was complete ball gown, shoes, gloves, wig. I mean, the whole lot. And she had to run off stage into this quick change and back again and be set before the thing went up. But, that's a minute is actually quite a long time. I've done 15-second ones before now, but they are quite scary.
Yeah. And so that's why the actor can't do it themselves, because they're still thinking about their lines. They're still thinking about what they're doing on stage. They know that there's 15 seconds that they've got to turn around and appear out dressed in something else. But you've still got to remain in the scene in your head, haven't you?
Well, to be honest, the best quick changes are if the actor is having to do things too, because, I mean, if you use this change on Sleepless, while I was doing the thing, you know, she had to step into the frock, she has to pull it up so I can grab it at the back. Then she has to put her foot in a shoe while I'm putting the elastic up on it. So it's a very choreographed things, and there are very few changes that the actor doesn't do anything, because you need them to at least put their foot into something, or with a glove they need to be able to.
Yeah.
I hate it when actors ask you to put their socks on, because, to be honest, it's so much quicker for them to do it than you to do it. It just is.
Yeah.
However good you are at sock putting on, it's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So you do involve them quite a lot. Sometimes I do remember telling one actor to stop behaving like a windmill, because he was whizzing his arms around so fast while I was trying to put a jacket on, because he was panicking, which was not helping me whatsoever.
So that's what's the title? Why can't actors dress themselves?
Yes, I'm sure there are hundreds of ones better than that, but
Favorite chapter?
Oh, I suppose it would be the Sound of Music tour, maybe, because it was 18 months altogether, and it was I got to see the whole of England, Britain, because we went to Ireland and Scotland, and Christopher was a lovely actor to dress. I loved the show, and I wrote the spoof at the end of it, which I got to appear in, which started me off writing, and I got to act in it, which, you know, a bit of a thwarted thespian.
There you go. That is the perfect chapter, isn't it? Really lovely. Davina, thank you so much for talking to me today for our meetup.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I've had a lovely time. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Ken was absolutely right when he said, oh, you've got to talk to Davina. It's a real honour to talk to you. Thank you so very much. Here's to more writing. I should be looking out for it.
Well, thank you for getting my book and reading it. I mean, that's always exciting when somebody produces your book from the piano. It's a first.
Right, well, thank you so much. And yes, here's to good things ahead in the coming year. And thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Davina. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Just talking musicals with you.